Welcome to the Educate U.S. podcast with your hosts, Stacey Schultz and Patrice Fenton, two former teachers and administrators talking about a variety of topics happening in the world of education and beyond.
Hello, Educate U.S. listeners. So we always say we have the best guests, and we love to re-invite our guests back. And today we've got a three-peater, right? Is that right? I think it's a three-peat. Akil Bello. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is your third time, and the third time's a charm, right? Yeah. So welcome back, Akil Bello, to the show. How are you? Tell us what's going on in your world these days, please.
Oh, thanks for having me. I am doing well. I'm surviving 2026 as best as one can, and, enjoying parenting and navigating a world in which education is apparently a bad thing.
Wait, I need you to say more about that, please, because that could be a whole lot of things.
I'm just thinking about the attacks on higher education specifically, but education generally. So it's a very interesting time.
It is indeed. It is indeed. And this is actually, these are the very things that we want to discuss with you today, particularly around, well, as usual, as we talk with you about things related to higher ed. But I want to probe some more into that statement. It was a loaded one. It was a loaded one.
I do from time to time make loaded statements.
So we're in this phase right now where we're bringing guests on and talking about different themes in our book. That is, it's available now for pre-order, as we've shared with our listeners, and is set to launch on March 20th fully for the world. And so one of the things we wanted to bring to this conversation was around the hidden curriculum. Dun, dun, dun. So I'll pass it to Stacey so she can dive in a little bit more. But I'm coming back to you, Akil, because I need you to unpack that loaded statement a little bit more for us. And I think I have a hunch that it'll come out a little bit more and more as we have this conversation. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can feel that statement actually. But is it completely new? Right? I feel like in so many instances in different times in our country, because education becomes a political platform of sorts, that it is relegated often in negative ways, particularly public education. And Akil, you're pointing out higher education, but I think we can say education overall, right? This idea of where and how we educate students, and who has the decision-making power to do that is really interesting. And it, for me, a little harkens back to an article that I think we discussed on the show maybe last year sometime from the Education Leadership, where it said something to the effect of education has been on the backs of underpaid women. Mm-hmm. And a lot of professions that are on the backs of women, right, are often attacked. And so I think it leaves itself open in some ways, like throughout history and here we are, it's Women's History Month. But there's so many parts to it, right? There's so many parts. So Akil, you seem to want to say something, so I'm going to pause and give you space.
I mean, there's so much there. Right. I think that you alluded to a lot of it, the history repeating itself. Education being on the backs of women is really fascinating, because there's a transition, right? There was a point at which education was all taught by men. There were schoolmasters, and when it became a profession for women, what shifted? I've done some digging recently into the common school movement. Like, I didn't actually realize that public education in the United States is barely it's one person's age. It's 100 years old, right? My grandmother, like, there was no public education when my grandmother was alive. So much of what we know about education is filtered through the modern era and through a lack of history. And this moment is making us reflect on echoes of the past and things that have, public education has been attacked over and over and over again at every turn. Great inflation is not a new term. Right? You can go back to Horace Mann. One of his arguments in 1850 whatever was written test would replace oral tests because of great inflation. So we've been making the same argument since day one. So it is really interesting to look at the long lens of history in some of these things.
It really is. And actually, it kind of steps us nicely into the hidden curriculum, because a lot of these principles and histories, right, are embedded in the hidden curriculum of what is education about, quote unquote. And in our book, we talk about the hidden curriculum. And I'm going to just draw from researcher Philip Jackson from 1968, who defined it as the unspoken lessons that communicate a school's belief, attitudes, and rules to students. Jackson noted that educators often underestimate the magnitude of this in their role. The concept is visible in all systems, including schools, I think. We talk about it a lot in schools, but I think it's in most systems personally. And so just wondering from your perspective, like, what are some elements of the hidden curriculum that you've observed through, I think a lot about assessments, Akil, because I know you do a lot of work in that space, but I'm sure you've made some other observations as well.
I mean, I think that comment is interesting and telling, because there's a hidden curriculum in society, right? There are assumptions around how to properly behave, how to navigate systems, what your expectations should be for different responses. Even if you take something, as simple as assessments, right? The assumption about when you take an SAT on the way to college, right? The assumptions about how often you take it. Who knows when to take it the first time and how much it should cost and what you should pay, how to apply for fee waivers or accommodations, right? There's an infinite list of unspoken things that either are passed down through cultural capital or societal connections that if you don't know, you're behind. So the hidden curriculum is a very apt phrase and can be applied in a million different ways.
So what are some of the ways that you feel like it plays out specifically in the world of higher education, both in terms of like admissions and, you hinted at some of it when it comes to assessments, but I'm thinking specifically now and kind of connecting back to your first loaded statement, in higher education, and how there's a lot of conversation now around, well, do kids really need college? Should they go into these other like certification paths? Or, there are a lot of thoughts there. And I'm not really even trying to debate that, but what I would love for you to speak on is just how that hidden curriculum plays out in that space, in that, I guess, the post-secondary space, let's say.
I think it plays out in expectations and execution. Right? I think that's what tends to happen most. What are the expectations of what you do next with your life? What are the expectations in terms of what you should prepare for? what are the expectations in terms of the return on investment? Even just that phrase, what are the expectations in terms of your understanding of investment, right? If you grew up and your family did not own a home, right, then your understanding of the value of real estate is different. Right? If someone who just first generation owning property, they're handed a piece of property, the ability to analyze the value of that property today versus the value of that property 100, and whether we sell it or not. Because it sounds real good. I have a house. It was given to me. I either could pay $10,000 in taxes or I can sell it for $100,000. Right? There is a hidden curriculum in that, in making that decision. Right? Every decision, should I go to college or not? Is it worth $5,000 in loans to go to college? Does filling out the FAFSA form mean applying for loans, or does it mean someone's going to pay the full way of my college? And the perception of that, right, can change the game. If your perception of filling out the FAFSA form is, I'm going to take loans, then people will opt out of that before filling it out and therefore not go to college. If your perception of that is it's a non-harmful opportunity to get aid for college, then you fill it out and you hope for the best. Right? So just the basic understanding of what the FAFSA means has an element of hidden curriculum to it.
Yeah, and I think when we had you on last, we were actually, it was right around the time that they were having the FAFSA form debacle, right? It was like people couldn't access it. They had changed it. It was, a big mess, right? And this also leads in a little that, and I know we shared this article with you ahead of time, and you may have already seen it in the Hechinger report, where, you're talking about funding right now, essentially, right? The FAFSA, the funding that students may or may not need for college, right? And the lack of understanding that. And one headline, this is from the Hechinger report, but it's also a headline that is just kind of shared, right, around in different ways, which is funding cuts, shifts in aid could make college harder to afford for low-income families. And when I was in schools recently, one of the things I heard from the parent coordinators is that the families were coming to them and saying, I don't even think my child should apply because we might not get what we need. And so there was well, I would love to hear your take on this. I know there's that article, but I think the headline is what was really confusing a lot of people. So we'd love to have you break that down for us.
I have trouble with media often, headlines especially. The could in that is doing a lot of work. Yes, changes could be bad. Crossing the street could be deadly. And that's where you get again into a question of, the hidden curriculum, into the question of low information versus high information families, right? Versus low income versus high income families who have access to information, to wealth, to resources, to people to help walk them through these different situations. Changes could be bad. Changes will always be bad for someone. Someone's going to lose out on changes. The question I think that needs to be explained or answered most clearly is, can you predict whether those changes are going to be bad for you? Do you try to preempt possible harm by not playing, or do you participate in hopes of winning? And to me, especially for something like financial aid is the FAFSA form is non-harmful. For the vast majority of people, you're filling out a form in hopes they give you money. The worst case scenario is they say no. In which case you're no worse off than if you did not do it at all. Right? So then it scares me to recognize that some people are opting out of a non-harmful thing because they potentially might not get all that they want. That's disappointing. I want to prevent that as much as possible, right? It's a free application for federal aid. It's like, it costs you. I can understand, maybe the CSS profile, which charges you per school. Like, that's a difference, right? But free application, you apply. If they say yes, great, you have some federal aid. If they say no, then you move on and you look for state and institutional aid, right? And sometimes those other aid are tied to having filled out the FAFSA. So there could be harm from not filling it out. There's almost no harm for the vast majority of families from filling it out. So, yeah, so those sort of reactions worry me because people are taking opportunities off the table.
It just makes me wonder because to me, it's like a psyche thing or a mindset thing. Like, what actually is, aside from like the headlines and things of that nature, and I guess, whether you're first generation and all that kind of stuff, those things matter. But it's almost like the word free is it's in the name of the thing. Like, it costs you nothing but your time, and it can be a little annoying, right? I got to go gather, me as a parent, right? I'm thinking about my college age kid. I got to go gather my paperwork and give you my AGI and all this kind of crap. But, okay, take a few minutes out of my day to do something that could potentially benefit my child tremendously. I'm going to do it. So it just makes me wonder, like, what are those barriers aside from like the things that we've discussed that like really keep people from taking that step, right?
I think it's the same as applying for anything, right? It's often risk. It's risk tolerance, right? How many no's are you willing to tolerate? It feels simple, but it's not as simple as it seems. I've applied for jobs and it feels like, what's the harm? You get told no. Those no's pile up. And I think that's one of the differences between low income and high income families, right? Your level of your ability to recover from disappointment, often guided by how comfortable a landing place you have when you fall. It's real easy to take a shot. I can apply for the job as CEO. If I have a house that's paid for, and I know I'm going to go back to my nice, comfortable home, if I apply for a job as CEO, I lose nothing. It feels fine to go home and sit on my veranda in the Cayman Islands. So if you have all these things, then the no is not a big deal. You're going into the apartment you share with 7 other people and there's no food on the table. Every no piles up. Every no hurts. And the ability to tolerate the next no and the next disappointment, I think it becomes, you have less and less patience for it. So I can understand it, right? I can definitely understand how tough it is to just live life accumulating nothing but no's.
Yeah, even the idea of a no is enough to like make you, let alone the actual no's that pile up, right? So,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thanks for diving a little further into that. I was reading your posts because, your bellowings. I really appreciate the way, right? Like this is what you do, right? Like you take these articles and you break them down critically and encourage people. You challenge some of the points in there and then you encourage people to think differently, right? And one of the big things we talk a lot about in the book is around trust, right? We need psychological safety. We need trust if we are going to move forward together, right? And you talk about parents like this. So let me back up. This article that you're talking about from the Heckage report, again, is that parents trust report cards more than test scores. And it ends with consequences for kids, right? So I'm going to ask you to break it down a little bit. But before I do want to name that you lay out a really interesting argument around, well, of course there's some trust with the grades because there is like feedback. I mean, you talk about it as, you see scores moving to a report card grade. So, like, okay, they got this on a test or they got this on an assignment, etc. So there's some level of transparency and sharing of information when it comes to a report card, right? And that builds trust. And I loved that you even pointed out that most studies show that most parents trust their teachers, despite what we see. When you started out saying education is under attack, and yet, right, in this blog, you demonstrate it's under attack. And yet, when we pull things apart, we see there is some trust and there is connection happening. So I'm going to come back to this trust point, but before I do, break down this article, this blog a little bit for us.
Yeah, it's funny because it just came across my, maybe Friday, maybe 3 or 4 days ago, and it got under my skin. I ended up diving into it. A report was released, from 2 researchers, University of Chicago and Oregon State. And the research was, how do parents respond to standardized test scores versus report cards? The essential conclusion of the report was parents aren't responding enough to standardized test scores. They respond to grades and report cards. And the researchers felt that, well, I guess part of it was the research showed, and it's a little bit of a weird study because they created 2 fictitious students that they asked an online group, so there's this paid service where people sign up to be paid to do surveys. So you took 2,000 paid people and said, hey, what would you recommend to the parents of these 2 fictitious students if this were their test scores and this were their grades? So it's already kind of weird because, like, my recommendations for y'all and my recommendations for me might not be the same thing. So, but let's leave that alone for a minute, the weirdness of that and the weirdness of these pretend students that you have to recommend things for that you don't know at all, right? So there's all of that. But ultimately, the conclusion was parents are more likely to act on, to get tutors, to do something, to help more with homework when grades were low, than when test scores were low. So the report in and of itself, the study in and of itself, was weird to me because there were a lot of assumptions built in. There's the fear mongering around grade inflation. As far as I know, there's been no studies whatsoever on grade inflation in 5th grade. The 2 students they created were 5th graders. I don't know what 5th grade inflation there is. So I also don't know that I believe the notion of grade inflation, right? It's a very weird concept. But even if we accept grade inflation in high school and college, which is where it has real meaning, they were talking about 5th graders. So the weirdness of that. But even if we accept all of that, as a parent who had 5th graders, I knew what the report card meant. I watched them bring home the homework. I met with the teachers during parent-teacher night. I knew their grades before they came home. My only care about the report card was that it reflected what I knew. I knew that one of my kids were stronger in reading and the other one was stronger in math. The report cards almost always reflected that. So why would I doubt this when I can see on a daily basis what the report cards show me? So the report went into, this whole thing. So it didn't address any of these things that, I think real parents would have thought of immediately. And the Hetchinger story doubled down on a lot of the assumptions and then added her own. The reporter added, there are some assumptions around grade inflation, some assumptions around behaviors that I thought the reporter added to the story, which did no justice and asked no questions of the research. And to me, all research needs to be questioned to improve it, right? I think the research is interesting, right? But my years around test preparation, for 30 odd years I've been working with assessments, like, I know test reports are terrible. And I know the reports you get back from the state on all statewide assessments, they essentially tell you, yeah, the math thing, not good as other kids. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? It tells me nothing. And I say it in the blog, how when my sons took their first standardized test, the Iowa assessment, I'm looking at the report and I can't make heads or tails of it. I have 20 years in standardized test work. And the categories, I can guess what they mean, but they have no real meaning. So of course I don't trust it. So the whole thing just seemed weird to me. It seemed very fear-mongery. It seemed very much like tests are good, teachers are bad. What are these parents doing that they don't believe this? So.
Yeah, which, doesn't fully add up to some of the picture right now of what's under attack. I mean, teachers, I think, are often under attack. But right now,
Yes.
You also see in media the tests are under attack a lot, too. However, there's still this seriousness that people say around, and we've talked about this with you previously on the show at length, right? The misunderstandings around these assessments that, happen and how they're not really telling us what kids know, right? And so how we keep having testing as part of the conversation. And I thought it was really interesting also, though, when you start reading more from educator surveys and such, and they're concerned that testing has really overtaken the classroom and that they spend too much time doing these interim assessments to tell us where the kids are going on the test, too much time on test prep, too much time. And, it's all really interesting to me, given that the way the world is moving and the impact that AI will definitely have. And it feels like we're missing the point and not having the real conversations that need to be had.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think it's an ongoing problem. It's a problem we've always had with assessments. And I finished the blog, or somewhere in the blog, I ended on I think it might have been the title. Tests tell you who your kids beat, not what they know.
Yeah.
And I think that if your goal, if your purpose, if your value is knowing my kid's better than the other kid, then you love assessments. Right? Like, if you want people to give you a gold star, you want to get the shiniest gold star on the block, and you feel that that's meaningful, then those people tend to like tests which force rank students, right? I prefer that if my child is going to take a test, that I get some usefulness out of that test. So there is a fundamental difference in what I want from a test than maybe what the state wants. The state does want to compare schools. The district does want to compare schools and maybe compare teachers, right? They may be less interested in giving feedback to parents to let them act on something, right? I think that especially in this modern era, we could do both if we were willing.
Yeah, which really kind of connects back to hidden curriculum, but also how do we really build trust, right? So if we're trying to build something with the communities we serve, what are the ways that institutions can earn the trust? So when you're thinking about higher education, or even in K to 12, and we think about testing, like, what are some things that institutions could do to earn trust?
So I think one of the things that I think happens so much in society, especially modern society, especially the social media world, is the stripping of nuance out of everything. And the more nuance and clarity we provide, I think the more you build trust. If you want me to believe your assessment, you have to tell me what it is, you have to tell me what it means, you have to tell me what's going to be done with it. It can't just be this number that labels my child good or bad, right? So I think stripping the nuance out of much of this and this is where the politics become a problem, right? Education has always been political. The allocation of funds for public schools by real estate value was a political decision. And in this era right now, we're hyper politicizing education. So it becomes difficult for teachers to do their work when state law gives a social studies curriculum that is not reflective of reality. Florida, looking at you. So it becomes like, how do you build trust? Like, it's really hard for a teacher to live in that environment when they're told that they have to ban books, right? So how do you navigate these political things when a teacher has very little control beyond their classroom? So I think it's a very challenging time for education writ large because of the environment created around it.
So what you're saying is we don't trust them. We can't trust them. We ain't never going to be able to trust them. No, I'm kidding.
I don't know if I'm saying that. I'm saying don't let politics make you distrust your teachers. Right? I think the relationship between students and teachers, families and teachers should be as strong as possible, recognizing that teachers have lots of restrictions that they can't convey to all parents, right? They don't control the curriculum. The state sets the curriculum, right? So they get to wiggle within the parameters they're given. So I think that's part of it, is that we need more understanding from parents around what teachers are facing. We need more understanding from teachers around what parents are facing. It's hard for a student to be successful when the hidden curriculum says sitting for 6 hours a day, right? And this child is just a rambunctious boy and needs to stand and walk the room, right? So how do you navigate these disparate needs?
Yeah. There's so much there because that makes me think a lot about the things that we've written about, Stacey, and just how you go about building the psychological safety that's necessary to even say those things. I think a lot of times parents, we talk about this deferential stance that a lot of parents take to schools, right? They don't go in thinking I can advocate for my child in XYZ ways. And this is, again, to me, another one of those ways where we see differences between high income parents and low income parents is the way that they come into those school buildings and the way in which they engage with the folks that are in charge or leading their children's learning. It's different. And these are the ways that these are the nuanced ways in which I think it is different. All right. So if I come in and tell you, like, listen, my child needs this in order to thrive, how are you going to provide that? As opposed to just accepting that your child's going to sit in a chair for 6 hours straight and he can't. And now he's a bunch of things that could lead to all kinds of things, including expulsion. Right. So there's just so much there. And we did it. I think we unpacked your original statement a little bit. Shout out to us. And so kind of to round it out, we've been asking this question of our guests these days. We're giving you a magic wand, Akil. And you can take your magic wand and do whatever you wish with it. And it could be to address some of these things that we talked about, or it could be anything else. Point is, you've got the magic wand. What are you doing with it?
Ooh, what am I doing with my magic wand? Do I get only one use? Like, because if my magic wand don't run out,
I knew it. I said I gotta give him some parameters because he's gonna figure out a way.
Right. I am doing all the things with my magic wand. Every billionaire is now broke, except for Mackenzie Scott. She gets to keep a little bit of her money, but every other billionaire is flat broke. Let's see. What else are we doing?
Go for it. I'm so curious.
All right.
Go for three.
Every billionaire is broke, and we put all that money into the school system, into public school systems. Private schools are banned. Private schools are just like magically disassembled. No private schools exist, only public education. And I don't know what the third thing is. Maybe I'll wait a few years to see the impact of those two things. But I think that would solve a lot. I would start there.
We need to find out where we get this magic wand so we can get it.
Right? I love it. I love those are really different. We've never heard those. Like,
no.
I really thank you for that. I mean, all the money, make them broke, give the money to the public schools, and close down private schools.
Yeah, that'll change a lot.
That would change a lot.
That would change a lot. Akil Bello for president.
Oh, God, no. God, no.
I do not wish that on you. I take it back. I take it back.
Oh, that's a great tagline. That would change a lot.
Actually, Akil Bello for president would be fun if I got to determine the start and the stop. Like, I'm not sure I could do 4 years.
Okay.
I can give it a good solid 2.
Okay. There we go. See? I'm telling you. I'm going to put it out there into the world. Akil, you're the best. Thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate you guys.
Please leave the people with how they can keep up with your bellowings and such.
The easiest way is to either go to akilbello.com, which is where I usually often blog, or to follow me on Linktree, which I don't remember what the URL for that is, because I think I can put all the things there. I'm on most of the socials, but so akilbello.com is a good place to start, and you can go from there.